Howdy, howdy. It is Kurz, and we are back with another video. Today is a great topic of current events around the world. We are going to be touching base on a few other things that he might not talk about in his discussion, and also, as well, I am going to be going into a few things on Grand Summoner, which is on the left side here. I am a Grand Summoners. I also have gotten into Alchemist Code, so if you're into any iPhone games, check out Grand Summoners and Alchemist Code. This is not a promotion, just some games that I really like playing. Um, so yeah, we're gonna get right into it today. I'm gonna do one thing before we start. This is Inside Russia. You can check him out in the description. Any of his videos, he goes over or does live streams he's in Kazakhstan, or he'll tell you, but he says it the right way. I say it the wrong way. He's not in Russia. He moved a month ago, almost a month ago, from Russia into this place because of everything that is going on in Russia, which is the mobilization of people like this man right here. So he decided to pack up his bags and keep up his current events, his journalism, I would say, or his insight of the war. He's closer than most people to what is happening on the Russian side instead of more the Ukrainian side. He does go back and forth between both aspects. I would say he has a great outlook on life in general. I really do enjoy listening to Inside Russia, and I hope you do as well. And I will be right back, and we will get right into it. I hope you are ready for this. This is going to be a great discussion today about the war in Ukraine. So just a little let you know what's going on the left side of the screen. I am trying to evolve. I'll show you when we get the certain amount. I need 2 more these dragon token things from this mission. So that is what I'm doing on the left side. Let's get into it. Again, today is mainly focused on the war in Ukraine.
Oops, this way. Oops, this way. You know what was the scariest thing in my life when I was growing up? SOI. That's a Russian for SDI, the Strategic Defensive Initiative. So called the Star Wars, a program later turned out to be fake, but it was a program announced by Ronald Reagan, the American president. That was well, I didn't really know what it was, but it was a system that used lasers in space to somehow shoot down rockets, nuclear rockets, launch nuclear rockets, and use space lasers. In Russia, it was called the Star Wars. And it was one thing clear, that this system, SOI, the SDI, was planned to be used against peaceful Russians, Soviet people, against, us, against the families, against me, to kill us. Because Americans were so mad, impregnated with war, that they simply wanted to kill us. Believe it or not, but I actually had nightmares of a little kid growing up when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, early 80s. I was so scared. I had nightmares about this nuclear strikes and this SDI, SOI, the American Star Wars.
So that just my own little story. It's been a crazy ride, but I remember as an American, it's not as it's got to be a different feeling than the rest of the world, because for me, I don't feel 100% secure in my safety, but I do feel that it is a high possibility throughout my lifetime that I will be in a safe scenario. Now, with that being said, I don't think any country or any nation in any time in history yet will or has sustained a place or a life of safety or like contentment that lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever, as we know as humans anyways. So my fear has always been that safety will be ripped out from underneath me at any moment, at any time, because of the fact that it's never happened. And just the idea of said instruments of war being capable of going off at any moment is something that is always settled in the back of, I think, anybody's mind in the 21st century, and that in itself is the fear that I think, I don't remember exactly what you know initiated it to begin with, but it is something that is there.
Howdy, howdy, everyone. Welcome to Inside Russia. My name is Konstantin, and I'm streaming live, giving you updates about living in Russia, the events currently happening in Russia. I am in Uzbekistan, but Russia is still inside me, and always will be. I would like to talk about very scary, very emotionally unsettling, very horrendous topic. Nuclear strikes, nuclear missiles, and possible nuclear war. Like I said in the beginning of this stream, I was afraid of nuclear war like you wouldn't believe. When a kid, well, all of us were, not just me, we were.
I think as an American, every time North Korea starts talking, our media definitely makes it a fear-mongering tactic for the whole community, which is all of the United States. I think that is definitely a thing. Every time that happens, I'm like, oh, we're about to have nuclear war, like, but it's not. Thank God, it's never happened, and I don't think there really is a reason as human beings that we should be even bombing each other in such a large quantity when we have other capabilities of ending each other's lives, So I think it's just a display of strength at this point, and it could be definitely used. You could use your display of strength in other ways, I would say. But, I'm one man out of billions, so.
Indoctrinated with this fear. We were taught at the very early age, and we were basically taught one thing, that the Soviet Union was a very peaceful country, was aimed at defending itself from the enemies. And the enemy number one, of course, was the United States. Bloodthirsty, war-mongering country, somehow wanting to kill us all. And the most sinister weapon they had was the nuclear bombs, nuclear rockets. And oh my God, that stuff was everywhere. Well, we didn't have much TV, just 2 channels, but trust me, they pumped that fear into our heads through the TV,
and they
through news.
I think as a
newspapers,
as a country that focuses a lot of money into war. I think a part of that comes along with that is fear mongering, because in the U.S. we have it every time something comes up. It is definitely a place of fear mongering, I would say, for sure. That if your society is afraid of these things, you're gonna put more money into those things. It is a tactic that has worked for generations. So
through radio, and me being a 6 or even 5-year-old kid, I was affected already at the time. That is absolute true. I had nightmares about nuclear strikes. I don't want to die.
That's fair.
I remember when I went to first grade, 1983, then the very first thing they started teaching us was...
What was my first grade? 2003? 2002? I'm not sure.
Well, first lessons, so to speak, first days. They started us showing images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. First grade.
First grade.
They were telling us how...
I honestly don't know. I think it was later than first grade. It might have been third grade, second or third, which is not that many years difference. I mean, honestly, it's not. So it's crazy to think about how, a country does that to their children. And probably the parents were children and they went through the similar scenarios as children. It's crazy.
Horrendous was the idea of nuclear war. And what happened to people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that the two cities, Japanese cities that were hit. And of course, they made sure that we knew who hit the Japanese, the Americans, of course. They emphasized, well, America was has been the only country in the world to ever use the nuclear bombs.
Yeah, which is another thing in itself. I mean, we talk about bombing a lot and make sure other people don't bomb, but we are the only ones that have. As an American, I am very proud to be an American, but I think if I was, let's say, as Uzbekistan, I would be very proud to be in Uzbekistan, and having that as the only country that has used nukes at this time, um, it's made me feel like I am the biggest bully on the planet as an American, and it's not the greatest feeling. And again, I wasn't alive for all that to happen, so I don't know exactly all the things that led up to those kind of decisions. But I've done research, I've been in school, and from what I know, it's not really justified, it's never weird. We don't justify it, but um, I think that, like I said, it feels like an unnecessary bullying tactic.
Well, every single class, every year, we were affected because no matter what we did, no matter what we studied, no matter what you know what happened, one thing was kept unchanged. That's uh, talking about the nuclear war. Always, always. We had political hours, so-called political hour, political information hour at every single week in our class, and we were responsible. There were some people allocated responsible for creating materials and stuff. And trust me, every other week was about nuclear strikes and how we
Which
were peaceful.
that was not something that was happening when I was a child or a kid ever, even as a teenager. We didn't. It was touched on a few times, but we didn't have things about it. Never.
And how our enemies wanted to kill us with use of nuclear bombs. Every single year, year after year. I was 10 years old. I barely passed 10. No, I didn't even pass. 2 days before I passed, I was 9 years, 363 days old when the tragedy in Chernobyl happened.
Oof! Wow.
You all know this word,
Yes.
horrendous.
Yes.
Basically, a nuclear
Very sad.
reactor blew up, and there was um, radioactive, radioactive, radioactivity spread around the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl.
Yep. Yep. For I don't know, that whole town or city or whatever it was. Watch the Chernobyl Netflix. I believe it's a Netflix. Amazing show. Really goes into depth. Probably exaggerates some things about it, but it goes into depth about the whole Chernobyl scenario, not scenario, the whole Chernobyl event. It was quite tragic and quite interesting to you know just check it out.
2 days after, I still remember the day. It was wonderful weather. We were playing outside, and then no one told us anything. But we had a celebration of my birthday. All my family came, our family, and I still remember that day. And then I think 2 or 3 days after that, we learned that there was a tragedy happened, and they didn't tell us first the magnitude of the tragedy, but days after, I think towards the 9th of May, we
Wow.
learned, and
Just imagine being him, not knowing, but it's happening. Kind of like with, for Americans, I know I was around the same age when our tragic event happened, the 9/11 event. That was so tragic. And the days after it, just the news coming out, and years after, honestly, about that event. It's, yeah, crazy.
we were all appalled. And you know what? The nuclear fears, they grew even higher because we understood what happened when a peaceful, well, so to speak, there were two explanations of nuclear energy in Soviet Union: the peaceful nuclear energy and war nuclear energy, military nuclear energy. Military, of course, with the bombs for attacking, and peaceful was for creating electricity. Large nuclear power plants. We all understood that what the tragedy, the magnitude of tragedy that could happen if, well, not if, but when the peaceful nuclear disaster happened, when just a power plant blew up.
Right. That is a very good point. Again, I have no idea, but just as somebody who's watched a lot about all of this, I would think that with a nuclear bomb, it is not as destructive because of the actual nuclear power plant had like a nuclear core and nuclear things that emulated the nuclear radiation. I think it still is to this day. um and I don't think a bomb is necessarily going to do that unless you construct a bomb to do that. So I don't know. Yeah, we'll see what he has to say about that.
We all understood what could have happened when a rocket would hit a target. Okay, disaster.
Right, and it would be very disastrous. Any bomb that hits a target is disastrous, and there would be a after effect. But I believe the radiation wouldn't be wouldn't continue to grow from that explosion. As where the power plant, when it happened, there was a part of that where it just kept it, the radiation kept coming out, worse and more and more. So yeah.
Soviet Union started falling apart. I was growing. Things were changing. One thing was unchanged. That's the fear of nuclear war. All the way through 1991, we were very, very afraid. That was one of the things in life that just was horrendous. In 1991, everything stopped. USSR was over, fell apart, and that was a big, big change time.
And I think that's the Soviet Union. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is.
Everything changed overnight, basically, and the entire paradigm of our country, my country, changed. All of a sudden, we learned many new things about our history. We learned that Americans were really not the warmongers. We learned that Soviet Union was much more warmongering country. We learned that everyone was absolutely terrified of us. Yeah,
And I think that's very. I think that's warmongering is a hard phrase for me to establish in this time of in the 2000s. I would say that's more of a phrase to use for like when the Renaissance or Mongolian times, where war was sought out because I like war. I think nowadays countries that use war use it as a like a trigger finger to a weapon when there's a conflict that they want to resolve. And I think America, along with Russia and a lot of, not a lot, but a few other countries that have put a lot of money into their war machines, um, those countries are considered warmongering countries. But the reason that that happens is more to the fact of resources or sometimes land, as you can see in Russia right now. But the land has resources. For example, this whole conflict, if you look at it from an objective standpoint, is more likely fought over the fact of oil and the fact that Ukraine is wanting to be part of NATO, and the fact if that happens, there are certain pipelines that go through that part of the world that won't be able to be profitable to Russia if they join NATO, and that is more of the driving line for war, in my opinion.
We were the bad guys, you know.
And another, sorry, this is just going to loop into the one topic I did want to get into, and that's Armenia as a country and Azerbaijan and Turkey. Those three countries right now are having quite a conflict, and as an American, as American, and the U.S. has a outside but more influencing of that part of the world. Even though we're on the outside, we still influence that part of the world. And because of that, we are, as he is describing, warmongering country. If we were more of a warmongering country in this scenario, which is playing out right now in that part of the world, we would choose to bring our troops in. We would choose to make military intervention the go-to thing to do in that situation, where Armenia is losing their freedom and losing their land to Azerbaijan. But because of, like I said, we're not, all these countries aren't warmongering. The reason we're not saving Armenia is because we have close ties with Azerbaijan, as whatever, however you pronounce that, with the gas and the oil that is going from Azerbaijan, which has been doubled since the war in Ukraine, because of the fact that most of all that oil and gas, or whatever you want to call it, in European countries and other countries, even I think in America, used to get a certain amount of gas from Russia, and that costs money, that gives Russia income. Now that the war is happening, we have chosen to side against Russia, so therefore we are buying more from Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is mostly, I believe, a Muslim country, which religion is not, I don't care. Personally, everybody is free to believe what they want, but in the eyes of the world, they, I believe, are a Muslim, mostly Muslim country, and Armenians are mostly Christian, I believe, and because of that, they've been fighting over a certain part of land, saying this is our land, this is your land, or this is our land, this is our land, not your land. And they've been going at it for who knows how long, for centuries, and it has all peaked to the point now because of the fact Russia invaded. We are not going to say to Azerbaijan anymore, hey, Azerbaijan, you need to chill on attacking Armenia. This is Armenia's land. It has been established to the Armenians that they own this land. And as an American, we're supposedly a Christian country. That's debatable, but you know, because of that, I believe Armenians believe that those countries that have that religion backing them would come to their aid at their most needed time in history. But because of the fact that money and oil and the war against Ukraine, which is, like I said earlier, most likely fueled by land rich with oil, because of that, we as Americans really don't want to step in and make a decision militarily to stop Azerbaijan, who is now supplying most of NATO, its oil, for this cold winter that is coming up, and for winters in the future, and obviously the rest of the year. That oil cannot come from Russia because Russia is, committing acts of treason. If you're a Star Wars fan, it's terrible, the things that I've witnessed with my own eyes over camera. Unless there's really good, ways of making videos of all of this happening everywhere, and they're just, somebody's a really good actor and doing all this. Then what I've seen is, pretty bad. It's pretty terrible stuff that is going on. I can't be a judge, but people decide to judge other people in this world. So in that case, in that eye, it is terrible. It's what is going on out there. People's lives are being taken from them for no reason, it seems like, at the hand of somebody they don't even know, which I would believe is an act of terrorism. So yeah, that's crazy. And the things that have happened in the past, it's almost like this is worse than those things that we have acted upon as a country. So, tying that all together, Azerbaijan decided to invade Armenia, and has invaded now their mainland. Within, I believe, the day or a few days of that happening, America did step in and say, please do a ceasefire, stop attacking Armenians. But as of right now, Armenia is occupied by Azerbaijan, however you pronounce that, which is the neighboring country. They are basically Turkish. Azerbaijan, they're like brother and sister, Turkey and them. So, as if you look at it in your mind, you got big Turkey here, you got little tiny Armenia here, and you got pretty good size Azerbaijan, which on top of that pretty good size, they have times X here, XXX, because they're getting money flowed into them from every single rich country in the world besides Russia and maybe China and a few other ones that are just embellishing their economy with money through the oil. So that their exponential growth of everything is insane at this point, and it's only going to grow from here. And it's crazy. They are going to become the next Dubai, and what they do with that power is up to them. And as Dubaians, I believe, put a lot of money into their entertainment and other stuff. But right now, Azerbaijan is putting all of their money into military, not all of it, but a lot of it into their military, and that money that they're spending on is going to Israel. By the way, just a side note. Israel is giving them a lot of their arms. So that's happening. And yeah, so all that is happening right now. And the reason we're not going to war is because of money and oil and things like that. And again, it's not, there's a lot of perspective to go with that. It's hard. The whole situation is ridiculous. So that's going on at the same time as the war, and as the war in Ukraine, and is basically a side product of the war from in Ukraine.
That was quite a revelation, let me tell you, but that's a different stream. We learned that there was no one to be feared, and that was a good feeling, liberating. For the first time in our lives, we understood that nuclear disaster was not in the works, was not in the future. And actually, the future was actually very, very bright, very peaceful. And not just me, all my friends, all people I went to school with, my family, my parents, we did this big time. We exhaled, so to speak, you know?
Yes, what he's trying to say is you're with your family, everybody, he just got home from school and he's stressed out because he just learned from today, oh, it's a possibility that America might hit nukes because they're pissed off at Russia for being communism or whatever it might be. And so mom's there and she's like, it's okay, honey. We as a family just breathe in and exhale. Let out all of that stress from today. And let's just enjoy this meal.
That was a good feeling. And then something, a very, very great happened in my life. Well, I think in the life of all of us. The International Space Station, this new wonderful project that two countries executed together, working together, the United States of America and New Russia. The ISS was launched. And instead of
So that's again, just in case there it could have also been I think I misunderstood what he was saying. The exhale was more of the fact that they were holding in a lot of stress from all of these things that have been portrayed, and it's finally, not such a big stress because the SSR or whatever he called them, you know who I'm talking about. The Soviet Union was no more.
threatening one another with nuclear rockets, nuclear bombs, we actually worked together in space.
Yes, and by the way, there are Russians and Americans working still together in space.
And a fantastic thing happened. I hope you all remember, I think it was 1994, 1995, that time when it was filled with so much joy, with so much enthusiasm, with so much, happiness.
And this is not today's stream, but we can talk about this another time. And I just another crazy theory. I love doing theories. We can do theories all day on this channel. But another crazy theory, not too crazy, but it was there's Russians, we're doing some kind of stuff in space. I forget exactly what it is, but there was a Russian astronaut that was questioned because of the Ukraine war if that was a stress between the pilots up there or between the astronauts up there, and she basically was like didn't even think about the Ukraine war or about any of it because what she is thinking about is the success of the human race and what they're doing up in space as a community. And with that, my little theory is the reason that is happening is because eventually we're going to be put into the what do you call it? Coalition of space aliens.
Finally, the new frontiers, this synergy created by working together, Russia and the USA. I remember, it was great. And I was thinking at the time, you know what? What a change. We took such a huge turn to the right direction because mere a few years ago I was afraid of this nuclear annihilation. And now, look at us. We're in space. We're working together. And nuclear threat, it's gone.
It just goes to show how quickly humans move on from one thing to the next. And just another theory, not even a theory, my belief, just look at ants and then look at humans. If you think about ants and how quickly their lifespan is compared to a human and how quickly they move and all the things that they do in a certain amount of day, and then look at humans and what we do in our lifespans and then shrink all that down into an ant size and make it happen in an ant's life, we basically do the same thing. And our minds are not that much quicker or slower, like we as a human, you think, in the moment, and you're like, oh, this is me, I'm a human, this is how it is, for the universe and forever and infinity and from the back and forward. But then, a new moment happens and you look back on the past and you're like, oh, I've changed, I'm the same person, but I've changed. And it just goes to show, as a human being, as a human race, we really do change so fast.
It's not here. There were all kinds of nuclear, like, disarmament treaties signed up, and the whole world exhaled, I think. And then the nuclear threat was not in my vocabulary, not in my horizon, not on my horizon, not in my...
Awaken! Oh, jeez. Awaken! Just have to do this real quick. So again, his nuclear shit was not in his horizon, because now we're friends. Like, everybody's getting along, we're doing good things together, we're growing as a solid community as a whole.
My life, until recently, until I would say June of this year, 2022.
Wow.
You all know what happened in Ukraine. On February 24th, Russia started attacking.
So that's a crazy thought to think about that, that many years it's been, there's no thought of any issues going on with nuclear strikes or anything like that. For me, it's been a totally different story. It's been on and off since I can remember. It's been like, oh, today we're going to have a nuclear war. Tomorrow we're not. Today we are. Tomorrow we're not. Today we are,
Using regular conventional rockets, conventional weapons, soldiers, and it started rolling into Ukraine. And it started, as the Russian official said, Vladimir Putin said, denazifying. I didn't really see any Nazis in Ukraine ever, but Russia started denazifying, according to the leaders, and
Again, we've already gone into it, but the reason that was said is simply for the same political reason that Osama Hussein, or whatever his name was, the dude who the Iraq leader, not the crazy guy. Well, they're all crazy. Well, nobody's crazy, but you know what I'm not trying to get political, but that guy, it's the same reason that guy decided to put Muslim into his recreation of the Iraq government in 1991, I believe, or around that year. It's the same reason that he started to include that into his government, to favor the people so he could rule his land. It's not the same exact reason, but in Russia, the reason that the Russian government said there were Nazis is so they could invade on a global scale they could invade Ukraine in a timely fashion before the world turned on their oil and made it even harder for Russia to grow or to sustain the economy and to grow as a nation, because most of their money that they get is from oil and things like that. So taking that out of the economy for their economy is devastation. They have to go to war. If we're an American, it's the same thing. I can understand that America would go to war in the same scenario.
Militarizing, because from Russia's concern, the Ukrainian army was too militarized, was too strong, too advanced weapons. Okay, well, why didn't they just decide to demilitarize other countries as well, Anyway, so
again, we just went over why we just went over why, because of the oil.
Terrible tragedy started happening. The bloodshed. People started getting killed on both sides, in Ukraine and in Russia. We've been there many times before. We pray every day so the bloodshed is over. I'm not going to be talking about that. What happened was, right at the very beginning of this conflict, it was clear, in March, it was clear that something started going against the plan.
So, this conflict has started back in 2014, and the reason that it started back in 2014 is because the regime in Ukraine had toppled, and that regime was friends with Putin and Moscow and Russia. They had deals with their oil and stuff. So when that regime toppled, America stepped in and basically they didn't impose power, but they basically, think about, you get pamphlets here, vote for this person. You get a pamphlet to vote for this person. You get a pamphlet to vote for this person. Well, America stepped in and made probably 3 pamphlets, but basically 1 pamphlet for all of those other pamphlets that were their person that they wanted to win, and they made that pamphlet times 20 over all the other pamphlets, basically, is what America did. And because of that, the people that America and the Western powers wanted to come into power was successful in a democratic election back in 2014. Because of that, all of those oil dealings and things that were going on not canceled, but ended. There was a lot of other crazy stuff with like oil tunnels that they were building and all this other stuff that kind of went up in the air after all this, and was made another deal to do this, to intersect, so Russia really wasn't involved with this oil deal. But then Germany came in and was like, "Oh, we'll take your oil." So then that's why there was a few oil pipes that still were made from Russia. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. So that is why in March it was things were escalating to the point where it was almost positive. I mean, it must have gone on Putin's desk that yes, at some point Ukraine is joining NATO. That is my guess. Something along that lines. I forget. There might have even been more information that I know about the exact reason for this all to go down. But there's something to do with a couple oil places. I know that for a while Mobil, which is like America, had a huge deal in a certain place that there was a lot of fighting going on recently in Ukraine, that there was a huge place that they were going to build a site on to get oil, but that was canceled because of the invasion in Ukraine. And that was, I think that was it. No, I think that is it actually. So there was a deal that was made with Mobil and a lot of other Western. There was another one, I think, another Western company that was made in Ukraine, and they were going to build, and I think they were building a facility to get oil to all these other Western countries without the help of Russia. Russia found out about that, and that is exactly why they invaded. And they invaded then to stop that. That's why they further invaded from Crimea. They further invaded to stop that oil from happening, from getting to the Western powers. And it worked. It has worked. The Mobil canceled their deal. They backed off. Nothing has happened.
We, Russian citizens, were fed disinformation by the officials of everything's going fine. But then you know, two and two couldn't be put together because they were saying everything was going fine, but then they were losses. Russian troops could not take Kiev, and they had to withdraw from Kiev and just go back. And everyone kept asking questions. What the fudge? Why did
Okay, bro, this is great because there was a moment when all this was going down back, and I was with my ex or a lady friend of mine, and we we were watching this live on YouTube from those like street cameras, and I kid you not, all of the rhetoric and all of the media and everything had me going that I was about to watch Russia zoom in with flying with hundreds of planes, tanks, everything. You know, I was going to see it on the screen. It was going to go, and then it was all of a sudden eventually going to go black, and YouTube was going to have the censorship thing on, and that's what I was going to see. And I waited for like a week, 2 weeks, and then eventually I just stopped watching it. And yeah, that's crazy. That was my recap and events of how that went.
if we didn't take it? Why did we go in there in the first place? What kind of plan is that? What kind of idiots were designing the plan?
Well, I think
Real
that there's been plenty of evidence to show that Ukraine has been ready for this moment since 2014, and they just been waiting for the US and Western powers to back them with the equipment they've needed. So the minute that the invasion happened, Ukraine was already ready.
questions that Russian people started asking. So about late April, there were wild rumors that Russia had to end this operation by May 9th. Because May 9th, it's a very significant date for all Russians. It's the V-Day. So it would be fantastic for Vladimir Putin to end this on the V-Day. And there were rumors that if it's not ended, then the full mobilization would be announced, and the whole thing would be escalated.
So again, let me just give you a perspective. So Putin established his goals he needed in Ukraine the minute it happened. Putin won what he needed to win in the very beginning of this war. The world made it look like he didn't because he had to establish these plans to make it look like that this is what he's doing. This is what Russia is doing. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Of course, if he accomplished capturing Kyiv and all these other places in Ukraine, that would create even. Think about goals when you wanna win, when you wanna be a successful person in the world. You have to set a goal that is unattainable, that you really don't think you'll ever get, but you really strive and you need to get that goal. You're gonna end up somewhere in the middle. So to obtain an unattainable goal, to set that is what Putin, I believe, did, and he exactly got what he wanted from that and got the objectives he needed, which I've already told you what it is if you want to go back. And he has won those objectives, and to this day has still won those objectives. The problem is that the resistance of those objectives, I think, was maybe he even knew that the resistance was there. But again, this for Russia is the end of Russia as you know it. The end of Russia, probably. If they allow this oil to happen, it is the end of Russia. They will not have the money to sustain their economy. So no matter what he says or does or looks like as a person, he has to save the country. There is no other way around it. There's no other way around it. Yeah, you can say I wanted this. You could make him look like he wanted all of this land because it used to be part of the SSR and all this other stuff. But the reality of the situation is that if he does not win that objective, Russia is no longer what Russia is. Period. End of discussion. Unless they find another way to create money, a revenue from besides what they have, in the past, there is nothing else that there is an option in this situation. And let me tell you, I'm not a sympathizer of Russia. I'm not a sympathizer. I'm an American. I'm a sympathizer of America. I believe in America. I believe in everything I have said, that America has done it because we have established our ability to grow as a nation, and every person in our nation has prospered because of it. And every other nation, I believe, strives to be something similar, in their own way. And so that is what I believe.
Okay. V-Day came, no mobilization, no visible escalation, but it was clear that Russian army was stuck in Ukraine.
But they're not. Again, it's I'm not gonna,
It could not go, it could not advance any longer, and well, it was advancing, but tiny steps, not as if had been planned. And then I heard about the nuclear threat. I still remember I was talking to one of the Russian people, younger people, and we were discussing the possible outcomes, what can happen. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, you know. And then I was talking, and all of a sudden I heard, well, when, you know, things might be very different when nuclear weapons is used in Ukraine. I said, oh, wait. What did you say? What did I just hear? Did you just say nuclear weapons used? He looked at me and said, yeah. What, you know, I said, oh, so you didn't make a mistake. You think that the nuclear weapon can be used in Ukraine? He said, yeah, of course. But he said, no worries. That would be a tactical one, not the strategical one. I looked at him like he was crazy. I said, wait a second. Tactical nuclear weapon, you think it's normal? He said, yeah, the Americans used it in Yugoslavia. I said, what? Where did you get that? He said, well, they said it on TV. Oh. Face palm, double face palm, you know. I didn't even argue with the guy. The guy was in his late 20s. That old feeling of fear of nuclear winter, you know, this destruction of the world came back. You know how funny? Those memories that had been long gone, and you think they disappeared forever, for good, they're not there. They're still there, every single one of them. And that fear had always been there in the back of my head. It was just not in front of me, if you know what I mean. It was like in a warehouse, far away, in the deepest, darkest corner. And all of a sudden, if someone was just took it and put it in front of me. Oh my God. My friends, that's not a good feeling. On top of that, I felt twice, 3 times worse because, you know, when I was a kid growing up, I had this complete understanding that we were peaceful people. We would never use nukes. We had nukes, yes, but it was only for defense. And we would just be, you know, defending ourselves if Americans decided to strike. And they could strike at any second because warmongering, you know. This time it was much worse, and it still is. This time I understand that this is a possibility, a very serious possibility. And this time it's us who are warmongering. It's us who are bloodthirsty. It's us who will strike first, well, at least have this this capability.
And again, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's really hard to say anything at this point because it's putting myself as a Russian. I'm not a Russian, but excuse me, putting myself as like a top official Russian who wants to save the country and make the country prosper. Um, like thinking about in that aspect, I can't. I even if I'm like trying to hold off of any other option, it's almost like that is the only option. Almost, like I'm not down there on the ground. I don't see the. I mean, I watch a lot of videos, mappings of all of the fights going on the ground that are actually been confirmed, allegedly, and with that, I can kind of see what is happening on the front lines, but still, it's not looking great for the Russians to keep those key points that I just said. Of course, it would have to, for those points to be lost, they would have to Ukrainians would have to create stability in that region and in that area for companies to come in and create facilities and start pumping out money and oil and to give it to the rest of the world to power your cars and everything else, obviously. But so yeah, it's hard to say if there is another option. I don't know.
Intention or whatever,
like what option? What like it seems to be he's exhausting a lot of options. If I feel like as a Russian, I would feel like I would more likely fight for Russia and for the country if I was more open about what was happening. But again, if Russia was just to go out and say, well, we're in this war because we need this oil reserve and to keep this oil spot so that we grow as an economy, and if we lose it, then we're fucked as a country. I think that would create China to come in, step in and help, and that would create definitely a World War III scenario. And as a leader, I think Putin is trying to avoid that. If anything, that is what's happening, I'm not sure, but that's the benefit of the doubt I try to give the world.
From I think it was late May. From late May, this topic of use of tactical nuclear weapon bombs used in Ukraine appeared a few times, and every time it was a very, very scary thought. It's kind of a thought that you wanna just not to think about. Just push it away somewhere where it's far away. You just don't want to think about it. But hey, this is life, And the thing is, people started talking more about it towards, the end of August, when Russian army, early September, when our Russian army started, how do I say that? Regrouping real fast and withdrawing to other places where it was needed much more, okay? It happened a few times. It happened in Kharkov province. It completely regrouped and went someplace fast from Kharkov region. And then Kherson, kind of same thing in parts of Kherson. The worse Russian army has been doing, the more talks have been about using tactical nuclear weapon bomb in Ukraine. What's the difference between tactical and strategical? Well, basically tactical is a small bomb, a few kiloton, and it's used next to own troops to break up enemy troop formation. I don't think it's ever been used by anyone except for in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but then there wasn't war. On the battlefield, it has never been used. Thank goodness. And strategical nuclear weapon is actually what I was afraid of when growing up. That's a huge kiloton, megaton bombs that they can, fly long distances. They go partially into space and then they wreak death around large territories where they explode.
Yeah,
None of such
any
rockets
bomb
has
does,
ever
but
been
that
used
one's
anywhere,
like the worst.
and
Yeah.
thank goodness. I hope it will never ever be used. But the talks about Russia using the tactical weapon, nuclear weapon, has been in talks. Vladimir Putin came out a few times, I think twice, and his spokesperson and Russian officials, they came out and said, well, it'd be crazy to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Russia will never use nuclear weapons. And every time they said that, it got scarier and scarier. Because I had heard that music before many times recently. They all came out and said in the beginning of the year, oh, Russia will never strike Ukraine. Are you crazy? And then weeks later, Russian rockets were flying, striking Ukrainian targets, military, civilian, by mistake or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a paradigm or definitely a coincidence or something to look into as uh, an analyst, I would say, because patterns have always plagued this world and reoccurring events seem to always happen, but it's never a sure thing to look into the future based on the past, but it is something to always look at. And in this instance, it's a different reason though, the reason that they were saying no, no, no before, in my opinion, is to hide the fact that they're about to invade and try to create any kind of um jarring element on the side of Russia for the Ukrainians. But in this scenario, I really do think that they're saying it in the meaning of like, oh, we really don't want to use nuclear, but we will. I think it's very honest. Um, but will they if those things cross? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how detrimental this whole entire thing is. I mean, obviously the amount of money that people have lost over this in Russia has got to be insane. So it's got to be pretty serious, you know? So I don't know. It's got to be all come down to those moments and those decisions about what what is needed and what isn't, and like, is there even another, if we don't do this, are we dead anyways kind of scenario, I think is really at play here.
People were being killed, and Russian tanks and so were being rolled, were rolling on Ukrainian land, and Russian troops were marching in Ukrainian land. Weeks after the top official said it would never happen. Vladimir Putin came out recently, well, after that, I believe it was on the 8th of March, and said that Russian conscripts, draftees, definitely are not being used in this special military operation. And the very next day, Russian Ministry of Defense came out and said it was a lie, that conscripts were being used, some were being used, and some were killed. Well, it was public, both statements. What can I say?
Yeah, that one's another one. I think again that has to go more on the lines of the lying part, like with the, I mean, it's the lying, this the lying part. You can really see there's a reason to lie for this scenario. So there's a reason to lie for the conscripts. There's a reason to lie to say we're not going to invade Ukraine. there isn't a reason to lie about saying we're not going to use nuclear weapons. There is no nuclear weapons going to be used. I think that there's going to be a very hard line that is met at that point.
Now they're saying Russia will never use nuclear weapons. Well, I really hope Russia will never use, because if it does, it seems like things cannot get worse for Russia than they are right now. But I think they can, because if Russia does use nuclear weapon in Ukraine, it's gonna be, well, I think it's inhuman. I basically think it's inhuman.
And again, there is a whole another aspect of it. It's like, don't use nuclear weapons. Fall back in line, join NATO, do the things that NATO's wanted you to do for hundreds of years, or not hundreds, but since it's been around, since the since World War II, do the things that we've been wanting, help the community, go against China, make China change. If those things happen, I think Russia could stay basically in the same line that they're living now, in the same eyes, but there would be a different scene in the government, and the fact that there's a lot of money being funneled out of the government into personal pockets in Russia, and that would change, and a lot of things would change for the top officials in Russia they would never want to see change ever in their entire lives. So that's hard.
It's really hard just to like think about this, and I don't know what to tell you. Well, you see, some people in Russia are actually not as scared as I am when they talk about the use of nuclear weapon. And that bothered me. It really bothered me, because how can you not be? This is the worst thing can happen with humanity. This is almost a guarantee to complete wipeout. That's the end for us. This is the end of humanity. This is the end of, I don't know, international politics, everything. This is certainly the...
I cannot agree with those statements. I mean, there's an asteroid that's gonna hit the planet, and that's the end of everything. Like, you can't. It's hard to say that. I get what he's coming from. It's definitely would be the end of that region, probably, or the start. Definitely the beginning of the end of that region. I think that it's already been the beginning of the end of that region for quite some time. Personally, I've felt that Russia has not been Russia for a long time, and I've always been wanting to see what Russia is really like. And now I know. But it's just, you can't. I love Inside Russia, but at the same time, I can't agree with fear mongering and trying to scare people into thinking that because this is going to happen is the end of everything. And even if it is, then that's it. Like, okay, because it's never a good thing to resort to this kind of violence ever in any kind of scenario. I would say, because in this scenario, it's the ending of the end of a regime and a country as you know it, and that isn't a reason to kill millions of lives, I would say. But if you're a leader of that country, if you as the person that you are sitting where you are or standing or doing whatever were the leader of that country, it would be on your shoulders to make those kind of decisions for millions of people, and that kind of power and that kind of influence on your mind might make it hard to make those kind of decisions. and know what is right and wrong to do in any kind of scenario, and what is right and wrong, you know?
End of life between Russia and Ukraine. And how can you not shake out of fear when you speak about that? Because I do. I do. I don't want to think about it. Every time I try, like I said before, I try to put thoughts of this thing away from my head. It's just too scary.
Yeah, I mean, and
I
that is very true. It's so close to home for you. I can understand that. And like I said, as an American, we're reserved and feel safe, that 99.9% safe, but we do feel safe. And having that has got to be very scary. And for you, it is the end of the world. And for those people in that region, it is the end of the world. And that isn't fair. And it's not fair to be put in a scenario or a situation to feel that way either. And that is the other side of it. You know, it's not fair. It's not okay. And there's just so many angles to it, you know?
noticed one thing though. You see, my generation, every single person I speak to, we have the same reaction. We are deathly afraid of Russia using nukes in Ukraine. Deathly afraid. Plain and simple. Okay. But then the generation that is after us, the younger generation, they don't have this fear. And it struck me. I understood that my generation,
Watch Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, or actually, I think it's House of Dragons, which is out now. Great show. They explain this, what he's about to explain, perfectly, and they show it in picture perfectly.
we were taught to fear the nuclear disaster, nuclear, winter, nuclear strikes, war. And I think it's a very good thing because none of
Okay, so he didn't actually go into it. I mean, he knows why. I think he just missed the note on this. Personally, is that he lived through that Chernobyl incident, and seeing that and having that so close to him, he knows how it feels. He's seen it firsthand, so he has that feeling, that fear. And the generation after didn't see that accident happen. They didn't have that fear. They didn't see it happen. So that fear is not non-existent in them. And I think, like I said, Game of Thrones and House of Dragons show that quite well. And how some generations fight to the death, and then their next generation sits on all of their glorious earnings from their fights, and do what they will with it, and not really have the same understanding of what the road it took and the journey it took to get to where you are.
people in our generation, none of sane people, would think of using nuclear weapons. But the thing is, after us, this generation doesn't have fear because it never was exposed to this stand between the USA and Russia, Soviet Union, and it was not given this thoughts, this ideas, this information about how disastrous that such nuclear war would be. Okay. Therefore, we have a generation who doesn't have fear, who doesn't have responsibility, who doesn't have understanding, clear understanding. That person I was talking to, like I said in the beginning of the stream, he said, well, but that's tactical. But that's tactical. Like that friggin' matters, okay? That's tactical. Yeah, right. Well, recently I started going to bed and waking up. I usually go to bed with prayer, and I sometimes, not always, but sometimes pray when I wake up. And I pray of certain things. I usually pray of personal matters. But recently I started ending my prayer with asking God not to let this nuclear disaster happen in Ukraine, uh, asking for not Russia not being able to hit Ukraine, and not asking for that not to never happen with us. I am deathly afraid of nukes. I think this is the worst thing can happen to us as species.
It's definitely
If we
one of the
start
worst.
using nukes against one another, even if it's tactical, just like the nukes in Japan, they gonna lead to it. Basically, the Pandora box will be open, and
I hope
if
not.
used once, then guaranteed, absolutely guaranteed, that in future conflicts they will be used again.
Well, yeah,
And then
it's already
perhaps
been used though.
small tactical one,
The Pandora box
most
has already
likely,
been opened.
will in the future lead to large strategical ones. And that is the reign of death. That is destruction of the earth, because there are so many nukes, and there are some doomsday devices by.
Well, that is a prophecy of all prophecies to say that that would happen is a stretch of an imagination, because it's we can't say that that is what is to come, but it is a scary thought nonetheless, and something to not take lightly for sure, but we as I think humans have a responsibility in anything we do, if that's internet or war or whatever, to use that responsibly, and to understand how to use it and what comes with the consequences of using it. I think we as a human being with the intelligence that we have to understand and have an obligation to know the things that we're going to use and what comes of that, you know. So,
I'm sure by the three countries, China, Russia, and the United States, there are so many large bombs, and we have been so skilled at creating the weapons that can destroy us all that somehow we excel at. Okay. So I am deathly afraid of nukes personally. I hope and pray that not strategical, not tactical ones will ever be used, not in Ukraine, not anywhere else. But the escalation has been growing, and the fears have been growing as well.
and that's
It
unfortunate.
actually does look like it's possible, like it's real in the future. God, please save us all. Thank you so much. Um,
And yeah, that's real. I mean, it's hard to dispute, but at the same time, the only way we can get through it isn't necessarily praying. That is something that we should all do if it helps, but I think that the main objective to do is to find some kind of common ground, to find some meaning of existence as a whole, not have to necessarily say this can exist or that can exist or have any say in any of it, and more or less coincide uh, as we do. There is always going to be disputes through life and through our existence, I think, where we're going to want, somebody's going to want something that another can't have because there isn't enough, or there's just a certain reason why they all can't have it, and that was going to cause conflict. I don't think that that needs to escalate to a whole point of killing so much that there's just nothing left. I think that comes from a place of anger and hate, and I think it comes from a place of uh, like frustration almost, and like this is it. Like who cares? This is it, you know? And since I think as humans, I think we have always in those moments lived to die, you know? We've thought about this is all coming to an end at the end of this because this is what we doing at this moment, and then after that there's nothing, so who cares? Like that's what we're doing. This is our big explosion and splash. And I think the biggest explosion and splash that we could make as a human race is to figure out how to be and not to be and have these things grow and have them as a capability and have them in as an arsenal, but more as a trophy holding place and only used for certain events that need to be used for catastrophic situations, which I would think would have nothing to do with our own planet. But yeah, and this has been Inside Russia, and this has been Kurz, and I have reacted to Inside Russia. And on your left, we have had Grand Summoners running. We were able to evolve our last person, and everything has come to a close today. If you think that there is going to be a nuclear strike in the near future, you can comment your own thoughts of that down below. Personally, let me see. I think it has been a possibility since the first one ever hit, which was back in 1940 something. And I think it has been a possibility ever since that day. And every day that passes, that possibility goes up, whatever that number is from that day. And it's only a matter of time until the next nuke hits. That is how it is. They've been invented, and until they are deemed as as obsolete, until they are deemed as obsolete, they will be used. And that is a fact, and people should come to terms with it until we deem them as obsolete. That is a fact. So this has been Kurz, and that is my take on what is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen soon or later, but as you can see how I answered that, you can see probably what I think personally. I hope it doesn't, obviously, because that is just terrible. But at the same time, I also think that I don't know, it's terrible. There's, like I said, until it's obsolete, you know, it's just hard. I don't think they should be used in any kind of capacity that is towards another human being's life. But again, arsenal, trophy holder place, obsolete, you know? So this has been Kurz. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for listening to Inside Russia. Check him out in any of his other videos. He does have some good insight about what is going on in that part of the world. And I hope that y'all have a wonderful rest of the evening. And this is